Welcome to Java SE Developer. Create and use interfaces, identify functional interfaces, and utilize private, static, and default methods. In Java 11, interface has 6 member types: constant variable, abstract method, default method, static method, private method, and private static method. So let's see. We make one interface called as interface summary. And in this interface, I will create a constant. In this constant, we have to write the type and the name. Public static final. Public static final, which is highlighting gray, they are implicitly defined by an interface. If we define it, then it's good. If we do not, then compiler will put by itself. I'll just commit it, and now I will write down an abstract method. So abstract method has no anybody, and there's also public abstract, which is implicitly defined by a compiler, and we do not need to define. After that, we have a default method. Default method is a concrete method. I name it default method. You can name anything, and it has a body. So this is a simple method as we use in the other programs in our class, and it can have a return type and it cannot have a return type. So this time I have used integer as a return type, and I'm going to say return constant. So it means that this constant variable we can use inside the default method. What about the abstract method? Can we use? Yes, we can use. Okay. And by default, they are public always. So, okay. Next, I define a private method. So we have to write down private int private method, and same like as above, return constant. The private method is also a concrete method, which means that it has a body. Let's see. So we can use a constant. What about the abstract method? Can we use it? Yes. What about the default method? Can we use? Yes. And what about private method in default? Can we use private method? Yes, we can use. Fair enough. Next, we have static method in interface, and return type constant. So can we use? Yes. By default, they are public. We write or do not write. It's up to us. In static method, we can only use static members. We cannot use non-static members. We cannot use abstract method, default method, private method. Now I create a private static method. Private, and I name it private static method. So these both are statics, so they can call each other. So private static method we can use inside a static method. And in the concrete methods, we can call static method. However, from the static method, we cannot call concrete methods. Let's see static method here. Yes. What about private static method? Yes. What about here? Can we call static method? Yes. What about private static? Yes. So be careful in the exam. They normally ask these type of questions a lot. So, okay. So yes, we have seen that the constant variable and the static methods, they have a membership of class type, and also a private static method have a class type. Class type means static. Another have an instant. On the next slide, I will define the difference between a class and instant. You have seen the required modifier, which I have put, and implicit modifiers, which are not required. Everyone needs the body with the exception of abstract method. Next. So what is the meaning of instant method in an interface? Instant method in an interface can access static method. Has a body like abstract, default, non-static, private. However, the class or static method in interface cannot access instant method. Those are static and static private, as we have seen. Right. Next, we will go over accessibility. So, constant variable accessible in all of other 5 members. And in a default and private, you have seen that you can access everything. However, from a static, you can only access the static members, which is a constant, and static method and static private static method. Accessible from instance method implementing or extending the interface. So what we do now, we will create a class which will implement our interface and see what we can access. So let's make a class, and class name is with interface. And this class we implements interface summary, and we are going to implement abstract method. What about the constant? Can I use constant? Yes. So in abstract method, what other methods I can access? Definitely I cannot access private methods. What about default? Yes, I can access default method. I definitely cannot access the static private method. But about static method? So for calling the static method, you need the interface name and then the static method. So these four, 1, 2, 3, and abstract method, which we are defining, that's one implemented. So we can use outside the interface where we implement the interface. Next, we make a new class, call it without interface. And in this one, we create an instance method like int instant method. I name it also instant method. And I would like to return the constant just to see that can I access the constant? Yes, I can access the constant. So I need the interface name and um, that constant member. Otherwise, we cannot call because we are not implementing interface over here. What else we can use? And static method. That's it. Only two. So what about abstract method? No, nothing. Just a constant and static method. Right? Yeah. So the same thing is say accessible from instance method implementing or extending the interface. So we have seen that we have access constant variable, abstract method, we are implemented the abstract method, we call the default and the static method but not the private. Outside the interface or a class we are not implementing. So we can only use constant variable and static method with a reference of interface name. So default methods are they're declared within an interface and they mark with the default keywords and they include body. By default, they are public and they cannot be abstract, final, or static. And a default method can be overridden by the class that is implementing the interface. If a class inherits two or more, that's what I say default method with the same method signature, then the class must override the method. All right. Okay. Let's make a class Bob, and the Bob, and there are two interfaces. We say interface Bob. What is that? He does? He walks and he reads. Okay. So define a one method here, public default int get speed and return 10. And the same default method I define in the read as well. Just change the value. He reads slowly and implement these two methods here. Two interfaces here, walk and read. So now so it will not compile if you do not implement the same method. If you um, want to compile this one, we need to implement the default method, because these two default methods are in the interfaces when we implement. So compiler needs to know which one, walk or read. So it gets confused. So the Java creators, they have solved the problem by specifying the same signature method in the class. For instance, if you would like to get the speed of a walk, how could you get that one? So, let's I make a new method, public get walk speed. So I am going to return walk dot super dot get speed. And now it will give me, whenever I call this method, so if I call this method, new bob dot get walk speed, it will give me number 10. Or if I call the get speed, it will give me 0. Zero and 10. So 0 is the class, comes from the class method, and the other one comes from the interface. Right? So what is the reason for these private methods? The reason for the private method is avoid the code duplication and encapsulation. If it comes in your exam, you can say like that. Okay. Next, we will go to the topic functional programming. So before the start of functional programming, we should need to know what is functional interface. Functional interface contains a single abstract method. And single abstract method, the method which has no body. And if that single abstract method has the same signature of any method defined in java.lang.Object class, then that method do not count towards single abstract method test. So let's first define the functional interface, and then we will go over java.lang.Object uh, methods as an abstract in the functional interface. Okay, so I am going to define a class called as line, and I'm going to create a interface eat. Create a method void eat int amount of food. Okay, and then if I implement this one, eat, say implement methods, and amount of food. So what we have done, we have created an interface, has a single abstract method, and in the class we implemented this interface and define the method. So this interface has a single abstract method. This interface, we call it function interface. You can also put an annotation, and if this method is not a functional interface, this annotation will give you an error. Like if I try to put another abstract method, so it will say that multiple non-overriding abstract method found in interface. So function interface cannot have more than one abstract method. So as we know that we have a class java.lang.Object class. In that class we have methods, and those methods, if we define here, those do not count towards single abstract method. Like has a string method, toString, boolean equal object object and int code. So as you can see that these three methods are from java.lang.Object, and if we define them as an abstract in the function interface, so these methods won't count towards single abstract method test. ToString method prints an object, or concatenate, add the object with a string. Equal method is used to compare object, and by default the implementation is equal to operator, this object with the equal to operator. And hash code we use if want to compare two objects, are they equal or not. So the condition is two objects are equal if and only if the hash codes are equal. Right? Let's come towards our function interface. So single abstract method excluding any public method already defined in java.lang.Object cannot declare an interface method that is incompatible with object. For example, int toString. So if I say this is not a function interface, and if I would like to define int toString, so this one is also giving us a error that it's not the signature is not same as a super method, so we cannot do like that. Let's make one more example of function interface for clarity. And I'm going to make an interface name sprint, and this one has a one method sprint dash interface. It extends sprint, and skip has a method skip sleep has two methods snore and one default method and one more interface client. It has abstract method reach, default method fall, static method get backup, return 100. And private static method boolean check height, return true. So we have 5 interfaces, and we would find out which one of them are valid functional interfaces. So for the functional interfaces, the test is single abstract method. Sprint, it has a one single abstract method, and if you put functional interface on the top, it holds. What about dash? Dash extends the sprint, and dash also inherit the single abstract method sprint from parent interface sprint. So if we put it over here, it holds. However, in the skip, it extends from sprint and inheriting sprint abstract method and has a second one. So once we do define functional interface, it will give the error. So skip is not a functional interface. What about sleep? Sleep has one private method, one default method, not a single functional interface. So this is also not a functional interface. What about the climb? Climb has one default, one static, one private static, and one single abstract method. So climb is a functional interface. So as we can see that these type of the questions can come in the exam, um, and to find out which one is a functional interface, and, please take care. Thank you.